Hi everyone, Glenn Newland here from Professional Stirling Clark, and today I'm going to read through with you our standard offer and acceptance. If you're putting an offer on a house with professionals, this is what you'll be signing. The first section of the contract which is to be filled out is the buyer's full name and address. Now it's important here to remember that this needs to be your full name as shown on your driver's license or passport and your current residential address. Underneath that, you'll have the email, which is your normal email, which we can send you paperwork to. Underneath that is offers to purchase as joint tenants or tenants in common specifying undivided shares. So if you are buying the property as joint tenants, this would be the normal scenario if you were husband and wife. If one of you was to pass away, the property would go directly to the other person. Tenants in common is if you're buying maybe an investment property with somebody else and you're going to specify shares in that property. So maybe 30% to one person and 70% to the other person. Next is the property location. So this is where we'll fill in the address of the property that you are putting an offer on. Underneath that, you're going to have the title details, which will have the lot, the deposited number, the volume, and the folio. This will be filled out by your real estate agent. Next is your deposit. Now your deposit can vary from property to property. If you're paying cash, you will be expected to put in a larger deposit on the property, somewhere closer to 10% of the purchase price. Generally, a standard deposit may be $5,000 to $10,000. It'll say a deposit of the amount you're putting down, of which nil is paid now, and the deposit amount to be paid within 7 days of acceptance. Generally, your real estate agent will fill this part out for you as well. Purchase price, this is the amount you're offering on the property. You put in your initial purchase price here, but if there is negotiations back and forth, the real estate agent will cross out your price and write in the counter offers. The final contract price will need to be initialed by both parties. Now it's important to know that if you are putting in an offer on a property and there is multiple offers on that, you will be required to put your best and final offer in this box. Settlement date. This will be your preferred settlement date you would like to settle the property on. If you're paying cash, you can settle up to about 2 or 3 weeks. But if you're getting finance from a bank, you're generally going to want to allow about 6 or 7 weeks for settlement. If you are selling another property as part of this deal, the settlements will coincide between both properties and you'll need to talk to your real estate agent about how to fill this out. Property chattels. Property chattels are what are included with the sale of the property. The best way to think of what you're getting with that home is that if you turn the house upside down, if it fell out, it is the seller's to take, but if it is nailed, screwed, bolted or glued, it will be included in the purchase price unless it is written in the special conditions below. GST withholding. This is where you'll have to tick whether GST will be applicable to this sale with a yes or no tick box at the end of the question. You should talk to your accountant about this. But generally, if you've created a new block of land or you're selling a new house which has been sold for the first time, GST may be applicable. The next 2 boxes below is finance clause is applicable or finance clause is not applicable. Finance clause is applicable. On the left-hand side, this is where you would sign if you're borrowing money from a bank. You'll need to nominate who your lender is. If you haven't chosen a lender yet, you should fill in your broker's details and your broker's contact. This is important because the real estate agent may need to be in contact with your broker to get more information about your application. Latest time, 4 p.m. on. This is where you'll write in how long you need for finance. Generally, 28 days from acceptance is going to be about right for how long you'll need to get your finance from a bank. Amount of loan is roughly in a percentage or a dollar figure how much you're going to be borrowing to go through with this sale. So you might write in 80% if you've already got 20% saved yourself. Underneath that will be the signature from the buyer. On the right hand side, finance clause is not applicable. This will be if you're paying cash and you've got the money ready to go. This is where you'll say we're not subject to finance and we're just paying cash. You'll sign in that box. Special conditions. In special conditions, you'll find any conditions that are not standard for this contract only. So such things that might be in here would be subject to the settlement of another property, anything which the sellers are going to take with them as part of the sale, they would write in this box, or if there's anything which is not council approved, you might find it written in this box as well. On the second page, you'll find subject to finance. You should read through all the subject to finance conditions just to know what's involved when you're making an offer which is subject to finance. The next signature will be from the buyer. So the buyer is required to sign in this box, which is their main signature on the contract. Underneath that, you'll find the seller, full name and address. The seller's full name and address will be in this box, and the seller's email address will be underneath there as well. The seller is required to sign in here as their main signature on the contract. Receipt of documents. The buyer acknowledges receipt of the following documents. The offer and acceptance. That is to say that you have received a copy of this offer and acceptance. So once this contract has been signed by all parties, you should receive a contract back. Number 2, strata disclosure and attachments. If you're buying a strata lot, then there will be a whole bunch of attachments which will be sent out as well. You will need to sign in here to say that you have received the strata documents. 3, 2018 general conditions. These are the general conditions that go with the sale of every property in WA. The agent will send you out a copy of this or give you one when you put in your offer. 4, any other documentation that's required to go along with this contract, the agent should fill in here for you, and you will need to sign underneath to say you have required the relevant documents for this contract. Next is conveyancer. The buyer and the seller will need to find a conveyancer or a settlement agent to help them with the settlement of the property. You write in the name of the settlement agent you have chosen, and then you sign in the box below. Okay, now we're going to have a read through Annexure A. Annexure A is a standard annexure which goes with almost every property that we sell here at Professional Stirling Clark. Now, annexures may vary between real estate agents, so you need to just read through the annexure that you get through if you're putting through an offer with another agent, but this is our one at Professional Stirling Clark. So this annexure forms part of the contract for the sale of the property at. The address of the property you're buying will be on the top line. Fittings. Fittings inspected in this contract are light fittings, floor coverings, and fixed window treatments. This section here is where you're going to find all the fittings that are included with the property. Section C will highlight any fittings that are not included in the sale. That might be if the seller said that they were going to take their TV and take their TV bracket off the wall as well. The TV bracket would normally be included as a fitting, but if they are taking it with them as part of the sale, then they will write in there that they are taking the TV bracket. Number 2, requirement by state law, RCDs and smoke alarms. The seller warrants that upon settlement, the property shall be compliant with state law in regard to the installation of RCDs and smoke alarms. It is completely up to the seller to make sure that the house they are selling is compliant in this regard. 3, seller's warranty. Unless otherwise stated on the offer and acceptance, the seller warrants that where installed and as appropriate, the following items shall be in a serviceable order at the time of the buyer taking possession of the property. 3.1 will just highlight all gas appliances and equipment. 3.2 is all the electrical appliances and equipment. And underneath that, you'll see that if a dishwasher is installed, it is included in the sale price unless included in condition 1C, which is things that are excluded from the sale. The seller will have all gas, plumbing and electrical appliances and equipment connected at their cost and available for checking by the buyer at the final inspection. It is the seller's responsibility to ensure that the gas, plumbing and electrical components can be tested. 1 week before settlement, there will be a final inspection on the property, and the buyer has the right to test all of the aspects of gas, plumbing and electrical. So the seller should not have these disconnected before that time. Otherwise, you may have to reconnect them so they can be tested, and that's going to cost the seller money. 3.3, electronic security system included, but not limited to all electronic equipment, sensors, wiring, smoke detectors, alarm units, and any other components that form part of the electronic security system, including an alarm code. If you have an alarm system at your property, it will need to be tested at the final inspection. You will need to have a code for your alarm. If your electronic security system is not working, it should have been specified in the special conditions. If the security system has cameras, then make sure you keep your internet connected and do not disconnect it until after the final inspection is done, because if you disconnect your internet and we can't test the cameras, you might be connecting it up again. The next part says the seller also warrants that the alarm system is not subject to an ongoing rental or monitoring agreement. If your alarm is monitored, you should ask your agent if the buyer would like that to be continued on. If not, then you should finalise that contract with your monitoring company. 3.4 will highlight that all plumbing, appliances and equipment will need to be working at the final inspection and are warranted under this contract. 3.5, all solar equipment, including but not limited to all solar hot water systems, solar panels and heaters. Anything which is solar at your house should be in working order, unless you have specified that it is not. If you have solar panels, The seller will make available prior to settlement their most current electricity statement showing that the solar panels are in working order. 3.6. Garden watering equipment. If you have reticulation at your house, then everything should be in working order and can be tested at the final inspection. If you have a reticulation system, which is a bit complicated, the seller should be there to help the agent show how it works to the buyer. 3.7. The seller agrees to hand over any keys and remote controls that are currently in their possession for the property. When the final inspection has taken place, the seller should have keys for all doors, windows, and their respective locks. 3.8. The buyer will be provided with at least one working remote control with batteries for each individual appliance at the property that requires one. That's air conditioners, garage doors, and anything else that might need a remote control. 3.9. If the property has a swimming pool or a spa, any cleaning or filtration equipment will be in good working order and is included in the sale with the house. If the buyer wishes to have a pool inspection done, they can do so, and they can send through a qualified pool inspector within the timeframes specified in this contract, which is within 10 days of finance approval. If the buyer doesn't organise a pool inspection, then the buyer is going to waive the right to have that pool inspection. If at the time of the final inspection there are any repairs to satisfy this warranty, which is if there's any gas, plumbing or electrical issues, then prior to settlement, the seller shall at the seller's expense and in a proper workmanlike manner carry out the repairs to the buyer's reasonable satisfaction. And if the seller couldn't or was unable to attend to the repairs before settlement, the seller authorises the buyer to obtain a written quote for the repairs and to deduct the quoted cost of the repairs from the balance of the purchase price at settlement. Number 4, disclosure relevant to the property. This one here is saying that if you're buying a property, you do need to do your own checks into that property. The agent will give you all the information they've got and anything which is on the certificate of title that you need to know about. But if you're buying your property, it is a big investment, and make sure you've done your own research into anything important to you in that school catchment area or in that shire. 5, improvements and exclusions. This is telling you that since the seller has owned this property, any improvements that they have done to the house have been done with council approval. If not, it should be stated on the front page in the special conditions. Any improvements that were done to that property before the seller owned it, they may or may not have a copy of council approvals, and in that respect, you're buying the property as is. Things that are not considered to be part of the property's residential building, even though they may be attached, are itemised below. 6. Legislation regarding swimming pools and spas. The seller declares that the barriers for the pool or spa will comply with the current legal requirements of all authorities at settlement, and the buyer is not required to undertake any works to the pool spa safety barrier. 7. Lawns and gardens. The lawns and gardens will be in the same condition at settlement as they were on the date of the contract. So when you saw the house, if the grass was green, the grass should be green at settlement. 8. Bushfire prone zone. The buyers acknowledge that the land is or is not in a designated bushfire prone zone. This should be filled out by the real estate agent before you sign this contract. 9. Buyer's residential status, permanent residency or citizenship. Buyers warrant that they're an Australian citizen or they have permanent residential status, yes or no. You will need to complete yes or no here. If no, you really need to make your own inquiries as to whether or not you are allowed to purchase a property in Australia. 10. Buyer's interpreter. If English isn't your first language and you don't understand everything in this contract, then this is where your interpreter will fill out their details and sign the contract on your behalf. Termite clearance. This contract is conditional upon a report being obtained from a termite inspector within 10 days of finance approval or acceptance of this offer, or if you're selling a house, it will be 10 days from an acceptance of an offer or finance approval on your property. You can ask your real estate agent how to fill this section out. If your report comes back that there is live termites or termite activity at the property that you're purchasing, your real estate agent will walk you through the next steps of how to proceed. 12. Australian Standard Pre-Purchase Structural Inspection. Your contract is conditional upon a building inspector going through the house and signing off to say that that house is structurally sound. There is a time frame to get this done, which will be 4 p.m. on either 10 days from finance approval or 10 days from acceptance of this offer. It is important to get your structural inspection done within the time frames above, because if you do not, you may be waiving your structural inspection. It's also important to note that structural inspections are only for structural items. So that will be the pad, the walls, the roof, the rafters. If these things are not structurally sound, it will be identified in your building report, but minor things that come up like rust on windowsills or cracked tiles in the bathroom will not be deemed as structural items and do not have to be repaired by the seller. If your structural report does have structural defects, contact your selling agent immediately and they will tell you what needs to be done next. The next section talks about tenancies. If you're purchasing a property which has a tenant in place, this is where you'll find when the tenancy ends and also the current weekly rent. Now, if you're purchasing this property to move into yourself, it's very important to talk to the agent about this if there's a tenant in place, because they'll need to figure out the best timeframes for settlement and when that tenant's going to be moving out. 13, subject to settlement of the buyer's property. If you're selling a property and it's part of the deal that your house has to settle before your new property can settle, then this is where you write in the address of your current property. 14, cooling off period. The buyers and sellers are aware that in Western Australia there's no cooling off period, and that by signing this agreement they are entering into a legally binding contract subject to the terms and conditions contained herein. This is important because if you're coming from the eastern states where they do have cooling off periods, you might be used to having a cooling off period, but in WA we do not. 15, condition of the property at settlement. The buyers acknowledge that they're buying the property in the same condition as when they first viewed it, with the exceptions that the seller warrants to leave the property in a clean and tidy condition and will remove all vehicles and rubbish at settlement. 16, carpet cleaning. Unless specifically stated in the contract, the seller will not be liable to professionally clean the carpets prior to settlement. 17, asbestos. The buyer is aware and accepts that asbestos-based products may exist in and about the dwelling, property, or buried within the soil. If you're buying a property in the city of Kalamunda, it is quite common that your property could have asbestos fencing or asbestos in your eaves. 18, distribution of copies of contracts. This part here is just to say that if there is anybody relevant to this transaction who will need a copy of the contract, that might be your broker or your settlement agent or a bank valuer, that you give professional Stirling Clark permission to email that person a copy of the contract. 19, disclosure of interest. This is just a disclosure from professional Stirling Clark that we do deal with a lot of other companies on a regular basis. If you need a termite inspector, a settlement agent, a finance broker, we can help and we can send you out some contact details that other clients have used. 20, pre-settlement inspection. As the buyer of the property, you're allowed to be accompanied by up to 2 other people in total to assist you with that final inspection. 21, further access and drawings. The buyers acknowledge that the seller is under no obligation to seek or provide any further drawings or plans prior to settlement, in addition to what has been provided to date. 22, access for inspections. This is saying that the seller is happy to give access for anybody in the contract who might need access for valuations, termite inspections, or building inspections. 23, keys and security device handover. All parties acknowledge that key handover possession will take place as outlined in the joint form of general conditions. That is, if settlement happens on the 10th of August, the sellers have until midday on the 11th of August to hand the keys over. 24. If GST is applicable on this sale for the seller, there will be a GST form attached which both parties will need to sign. So I hope that makes sense to everyone, but if you're unsure about anything in this document, you should contact your sales representative before submitting your offer. Thanks for watching.